Hello, I'm Lisa Rawls and I'm an Associate Director at Seymour Taylor. Following on from Rishi Sunak's budget yesterday on the 3rd of March, I'm going to be taking you through the key elements of what this budget means to you or your business. If you would like to contact me after watching the recording, my details will be available at the end. Here are some of the comments that Rishi made during the day yesterday. We've got to repair long-term damage and that will take time. Harm done by coronavirus has been acute, and it's going to take this country and the whole world a long time to recover from this extraordinary economic situation, but we will recover. In the year since the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, delivered his very first budget to a packed Commons chamber on the 11th of March last year, more than 135,000 people in the UK have sadly died from coronavirus. There have been 3 national lockdowns, the economy has shrunk by 10%, and the coronavirus support measures have cost around £280 billion. The support announced at spring budget last year, plus the further measures announced yesterday, come to £407 billion. As a result, government borrowing is expected to rise from a forecasted £55 billion to about £355 billion by the end of the year. Meanwhile, national debt is already approaching 100% of GDP at 2.1 trillion and could rise to 120% of GDP during the first half of the decade, according to the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR. The widely respected Institute for Fiscal Studies warned late last year that around £40 billion of tax rises will be needed by the middle of the decade to keep borrowing down to £80 billion a year and debts down to 100% of GDP. This prompted intense speculation that they could come as soon as this budget. With the Conservatives having committed in their 2019 general election manifesto not to raise the rate of income tax, national insurance, or VAT, much of the speculation about possible tax rises was focused on the capital gains tax and corporation tax. At the same time, the budget came against the background of a growing sense of cautious optimism. More than 20 million people have now been vaccinated against coronavirus, and just over a week ago, the Prime Minister set out the government's roadmap out of lockdown. In announcing the roadmap, the Prime Minister, echoed by various ministers over the intervening days, all but confirmed the Chancellor would announce further support measures for coronavirus for businesses and the self-employed at this budget. Then, at 10 p.m, the night before the budget, several major news organisations reported the same details of how the various coronavirus support measures would be extended, leaving little doubt about what the Chancellor would say on the subject. The question then, as Mr Sunak rose to the dispatch box in a virtually deserted Commons chamber, was whether he would increase any taxes immediately or hold off until a later date. We now know the main headline-grabbing changes surround corporation tax increasing by far more than was expected, stamp duty extension, and also a super deduction for corporate investments. The Chancellor began by noting the way that the coronavirus pandemic has fundamentally altered our way of life and summarising the government's response to the crisis. After promising to do whatever it takes to support people through the crisis, he said, "It's going to take this country and the whole world a long time to recover." Turning to the economic outlook, the Chancellor said that the OBR is now expecting a swifter and more sustained recovery than it had expected in November, with the economy now expected to return to its pre-COVID level by the end of next year, six months earlier than forecast. However, he said that in 5 years' time, the economy will still be 3% smaller than it would have been had it not been for the pandemic. He said the growth this year is forecast to be 4%, rising to 7.3% in 2022, followed by growth of 1.7%, 1.6%, and 1.7% again in subsequent years. Unemployment rates are expected to peak at 6.5% next year, which is significantly lower than the expected rate of 11.9%, and I'm sure this is in no small part down to the coronavirus job retention scheme. Turning to the government's coronavirus support measures, the Chancellor confirmed, as had been trailed, that the furlough scheme, the coronavirus job retention scheme, would be extended to the end of September 2021, continuing to pay furloughed workers 80% of their usual wages, capped at £2,500 a month. However, unlike the scheme as it currently operates, he said employers will have to contribute 10% of furloughed workers' wages in July and then 20% in August and September. Moving then on to support for self-employed individuals, The Chancellor said that 600,000 newly self-employed people would be eligible, and that the fourth and fifth grants are now open to self-employed people who can show that they were trading in 2019-20 via their tax returns. The fourth round of the scheme covers the months from February until the end of April and will once again provide grants worth up to 80% of trading profits, capped at £7,500. Applications for this will open in late April. He then announced a fifth grant covering May through to the end of September, worth 3 months of average profits. This will continue to pay grants at 80% of usual trading profits, again capped at £7,500. However, for people whose turnover has fallen by less than 30%, they can still apply, but the grant will reduce to 30% of usual trading profits, capped at £2,850 for people whose turnover has fallen by less than that. The Chancellor also announced the extension of the £20 a week uplift to universal credit for people who have lost their jobs, and this is in place for the next 6 months. Moving to direct support for businesses, he announced the launch of the Recovery Loan Scheme from 6th of April this year to replace the government's existing coronavirus loan schemes. The Recovery Loan Scheme will allow any business, any size, to apply for a loan between £25,000 and £10 million. This is backed by an 80% government guarantee. On to the housing sector and the property market. The Chancellor said that the £500,000 stamp duty land tax nil rate ban will remain in place for a further 3 months until 30th of June 2021. It will then fall to £250,000, which is still twice its normal rate, until the end of September. He then moved on to announce a new mortgage guarantee scheme beginning in April 2021. The scheme will offer a government guarantee to lending, offering 95% mortgages on homes worth up to £600,000. The Chancellor said that the cost of coronavirus support and the impact of the economic downturn on tax receipts meant that borrowing would reach £355 billion this year and £234 billion next year. Reiterating his commitment to sustainable public finances, he said it was necessary to take steps to get the public finances back on track. The Chancellor said that the income tax personal allowance and the higher rate threshold will increase in line with the Consumer Price Index in April 2021, but will then remain at this level until April 2026, cancelling planned increases in line with inflation. What this means for most people is that they will see tax rises in real terms over the next few years. He said that the thresholds for inheritance tax, the pensions lifetime allowance, and the annual exempt amount for CGT will remain at their current levels until April 2026. Duties on alcohol and fuel will not go up, and the fuel duties have now not increased for 11 years. It was also announced that a new green bond will be released by the government-backed National Savings and Investments, the NS&I. NS&I have been seeing heavy criticism in the last year for their poor service, so this may well help their reputation and will also be a useful tax savings route for individuals. Moving to business tax measures, Chancellor confirmed the widely expected increase in corporation tax from 19%, however, up to 25%. This will come into effect from April 2023. He also announced a new small profits rate of corporation tax for small businesses with profits below £50,000 of 19%, meaning they will see no increase. Businesses with profits of more than £50,000 and £250,000 will see a tapered rate, while those with profits of more than £250,000 will pay the full 25% rate. The Chancellor moved on to say that the government will extend the trading loss carryback rule temporarily from 1 to 3 years. Loss-making unincorporated businesses and those that are not part of a corporate group will be entitled to relief up to £2 million of losses in 2020-21 and 2021-22. The £2 million cap will be subject to a group level limit, requiring groups with companies that have capacity to carry back losses in excess of £200,000 to apportion the cap between its companies. Despite the increase to corporation tax, the UK will still have the lowest corporation tax rate in any of the G7 countries, and it is expected that 1.4 million businesses will not be affected by these changes. He also announced a 2-year temporary capital allowances super deduction of 130% for main rate assets such as plant and machinery, as well as a 50% first-year allowance for special rate assets. And this will be coming into effect from the 1st of April this year. Meanwhile, he said that the current VAT registration threshold of £85,000 will remain in place for a further 2 years from April 22. The Chancellor also confirmed reviews of research and development tax relief and enterprise management incentives will take place. Within the hospitality sector, he said that the VAT reduction from 20% to 5% on many goods and services in the hospitality and leisure sectors will now be extended from the 31st of March up to the 30th of September 2021. It will then move to an interim rate of 12.5% until it reverts to the 20% rate in April 22. The Chancellor also said that the government will double incentive payments for employers in all sectors who take on apprentices, and that will increase to £3,000. The Chancellor confirmed that the current 100% business rates relief for eligible retail, hospitality and leisure businesses will continue for 3 months until 30th of June 2021. There will then be a 66% reduction in business rates for those businesses until 31st of March 2022. This is capped at £2 million for businesses who were required to close on the 5th of January and capped at £105,000 for any other business. He said that the new restart grants will also be launched in April, making one-off payment of up to £6,000 per premises for non-essential retail businesses and up to £18,000 for businesses in the hospitality sector and others that are reopening later. Moving to spending announcements, the Chancellor confirmed the launch of the UK Infrastructure Bank based in Leeds, which will support investment in public and private infrastructure projects. He said there would be an additional £1.6 billion to support the vaccine rollout, an additional £1 billion in local funding for towns, and a £375 million future fund breakthrough for highly innovative companies. Again, returning to the hospitality sector, he announced the launch of a £150 million community ownership fund for communities to invest in assets such as pubs, theatres, shops, or sports clubs. Support is also being provided to a number of key areas such as domestic violence, arts venues, community groups, and sports. Finally, he announced the locations of 8 free ports, which are subject to simpler planning rules, infrastructure grants, and lower taxes. They will be based at East Midlands Airport, Felixstowe and Harwich, Humber, Liverpool City Region, Plymouth, Solent, Thames, and Teesside. Free ports are usually located around shipping ports or airports. Goods that arrive into free ports from abroad aren't subject to the tax charges called tariffs that are normally paid to the government. These taxes are only paid if the goods leave the free port and are moved elsewhere in the UK. Otherwise, they are sent overseas without the charges being paid. But why are free ports being brought back? It's hoped that they will regenerate deprived areas. In his budget, Rishi Sunak said that they would have different rules to make it easier and cheaper to do business. In England, companies inside of the sites will also be offered temporary tax breaks, mostly lasting 5 years. These include reductions to the tax companies will pay on their existing property, and when they buy new buildings, employers will also pay reduced national insurance for new staff. Each one can be up to 45 kilometres, which is 27 miles across. Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland are expected to announce their own free port policies. Although most of the key coronavirus support business measures had been revealed in advance of the budget, the Chancellor confirmed that taxes will rise in the coming years, as had been widely expected. As ever, what the budget means for individuals and businesses will become clearer as more details of the specific policies are announced in the coming days and weeks. It does seem clear, however, that businesses and individuals are about to start meeting the costs of the government's coronavirus support measures. That concludes our update on the budget for March 2021. If you have any questions or you would like to discuss any of the budget in any more detail, please do get in touch. My email address is lisa.rolls@stca.co.uk or contact us on 01494 552 100. Don't forget to connect with us on our social media channels as well as Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook. Thank you for listening and goodbye.